Hi everyone, my name is Cathrine Prenot and I'm excited to share my little mini lecture with you on deep sea ecology. I became interested in deep sea ecology through my work as a teacher at sea, and I mention this because I'm going to upload a couple of cartoons for you that I did that were really the inspiration for me to be interested in this subspecies of ecology, just to explain a little bit of background information on it. But the deep sea is the largest ecosystem on the planet, from the shelf edge at about 200 meters down to the deepest trenches at 11,000 meters. And it's just such a unique place. First of all, it's just enormous. I mean, we're talking 434 million square kilometers here, of which about 1% is explored. When you consider that 5% of the ocean is explored, we really just have this incredible lack of knowledge about this part of our planet. I mean, this little ecosystem has 40,000 mile long mountain ranges, has these oases in the deep hydrothermal vents, and then deep sea trenches. And then when you think about the conditions for life that are existing in all these different places, you have average temperatures of less than 4 degrees Celsius, although there's been active metabolic life detected from -2 degrees Celsius to 150 degrees Celsius and more. And some of these are just the same organism that is able to live from 4 degrees Celsius to 200. You have near total darkness, pressure much greater than sea level, and of course our whole idea about life in the terrestrial realm, there is really no net photosynthetic primary production down there because everything is dark. When we think about this subdiscipline and how it relates to the broad definition of ecology, I like to consider ecology as being the relationship of organisms to one another and their physical environment. And then, think big picture about the extreme conditions that these organisms are living in, like the temperature tolerance, food availability, the symbioses, adaptations to the environment, and then there are a lot of constant deep sea ecosystems, with some exceptions such as those hydrothermal vents, which I think is just really interesting. Consider the important theories then of deep sea ecology, and one of these is energy. As I mentioned, there's no net photosynthesis down there, so recycling is really important. Chemosynthesis, symbionts, and then marine surface production kind of drifting down. It may, however, not really be like the deep sea on a perpetual diet. There are areas of lots and lots of activity and productivity, but it's kind of really pretty diverse, as I'll talk about later. There is an incredible amount of diversity of life as well, and there's really a need to understand how these different life forms are related to one another through DNA analysis. Reproduction is just super interesting in terms of, there's delayed reproduction. So sometimes the life forms get bigger. There's more of a focus on females just because there's more energy put into the oocytes, the female gametes. Some of the reproduction is delayed as well, so you get these organisms that live in incredibly long lifespans. This is a 11,000-year-old glass sponge that was just discovered in the East China Sea, far below the ocean, and a lot of organisms delay their life as well. You have organisms such as the 1,000-year-old black coral or 600-year-old tube worms. Organisms also, for reproduction, they actually, females sometimes carry males internally. It beats having to go out in the ocean and find one another, find your own species. There's also really incredible symbioses, such as this bone-eating worm that has symbiotic bacteria as well. Communication is incredibly important. You think about not only how to find a mate, but then how to get away from predators. And sound is important, so also chemical signals and light are incredibly important in the deep sea. And then finally, I think it's very crucial to understand that the deep sea isn't just sort of a homogeneous landscape. It's highly complex and heterogeneous, and there's a lot of different contrasting places to live. I want to talk to you a little bit about prominent researchers in the field and then a history of the subdiscipline at the same time. I think one of the interesting parts for the subdiscipline is that people became really interested in the deep sea in part through like discovery of the giant squid or laying a transatlantic cable. When they pulled up this cable, this is in the late 1800s, they found all these organisms living on it. But then when we think about the scientific exploration, I just picked a couple important dates. 1973, they determined there was a depth diversity gradient, where as you got deeper into the water, then life became less and less diverse. Although then just several years after that, the Alvin mission in the Galapagos Rift, found these hydrothermal vents with this wealth of species and diversity unknown anywhere else, that rivaled even, the same acreage of a rainforest. And that was at 7,500 feet. These deeper ocean systems are fueled by chemosynthesis, and that was published first in 1985. And then you have as well this understanding that energies in the ocean are also, there are these flux events which are incredibly important, such as whale falls or phytoplankton. After the spring major production, they die and then drift down, and you can actually measure production in the deep ocean by the advent and arrival of these flux events. New research has really focused on prokaryotes in the ocean subfloor, in part because of drilling, deep sea drilling. They've been able to actually find life even deeper, and prokaryotes abound in the ocean subfloor. It's really just fascinating. I'm going to just highlight three scientists or three people that I think are really important for ocean research now. And there's so many, but I just thought I could cover three in my mini lecture for you. Claude Sobel is fascinating, mostly because he was the first one to be able to cultivate deep sea bacteria in the lab. He worked at a Scripps oceanographic research facility, and he discovered 65 new species of bacteria, but he actually grew them in the lab in these highly pressurized containers mimicking deep sea conditions. I included Robert Ballard, who is the one that did all the work with the Titanic, only because I think his impact has been to help the public care in some ways, in more than they would just because they're able to see it. His work with cameras and discovering the Titanic and others, I think, was very important for a generation of new researchers and explorers of the deep. Colleen Cavanaugh is a great story. She actually she was a postdoc at Harvard, and she was at a lecture explaining these huge tube worms that they had found in the Galapagos Rift on the Alvin expedition. And she heard, they have no digestive tract. They have this trophosome, which was packed with sulfur crystals. And she recognized right then and was able to prove it, that the trophosome were packed with chemosynthetic bacteria. Trillions and trillions and trillions of them. But research isn't just about bacteria or big ships. There's wonderful research about Sifrins living in anoxic, so no oxygen, hypersaline, so lots and lots of salt conditions. And you have to just really consider what we understand about life and how it's different, because they don't even have mitochondria. They have these hydrosome-like bodies, which are different from what we would actually expect. And that's how they get their energy. The new frontier in research is, I think, these deep sea bacteria. There's archaea and bacteria, and we're finding them further and further and further below the ocean floor. There's a great research going on at North Pond right now by Dr. Katrina Edwards. She's nicknamed them Iron Maiden because all of her bacteria feed on the igneous crust of the earth. But she is looking and finding bacteria 500 meters below the seafloor. And then finally, just consider the big ideas of viruses. I think sometimes they're hidden, but viruses are so important on terrestrial ecosystems, and they're also important in benthic zones as well. There's a lot of viruses seem to exploit archaea versus bacteria domain, and they don't really know why, so I think it's just kind of interesting research of why are these bacteria killing 2 times more archaea even though the bacteria are 2 times more plentiful. I just want to leave you with a couple different questions just to think about. And, as we consider all of these different organisms in the deep, what are our changing ideas about diversity, and what are our changing ideas about life and the boundaries of what can survive on this planet, and then what we actually know of as being life? I want you to consider the symbioses and how interrelated different species are, and then also how our ideas about our biosphere may actually change as well through this research. We're finding life 500 meters below, right, living on the crust. So I just think it's really amazing. This and more questions I'd love to discuss with you on the discussion board, and I will upload my references for you to see, and a couple cartoons as well. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I look forward to your presentations as well.